Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the co-owner of the Chicago Institution and Comic Shop, Challengers Comics and Conversation. It's Patrick Brower. Thanks for coming on, Patrick.
David, it's a pleasure to be back. Thank you for having me again. And may I just start by saying you have never sounded sexier.
Oh, thank you. It's the Dayquil in me. It's the illness in me that's giving me this robust Beverly D'Angelo type voice, I like to think.
That plus the literally 3 cigarettes I can see you smoking simultaneously.
That's true. Is it weird that Beverly D'Angelo is my go-to for like husky voice sexiness? Maybe not. I don't know.
I mean, mine would have been Kathleen Turner, so I think we're in the same ballpark.
We're definitely dating ourselves right now, but that's okay. And you know, probably the first comic podcast to ever start off with a conversation about Kathleen Turner and Beverly D'Angelo. But we're not here to talk about actresses from the 80s that were enormously popular. We're here to talk about comic books. We're recording this on Saturday, January 4th. Patrick, how was the first Saturday of 2025 for Challengers?
That is more of a loaded question than you realize. And I actually had just done a little dive into what I should expect sales-wise today, because the first half of the day started out pretty dang slow from what we've been experiencing the last couple of months. But when I pulled up the 2024 January sales statistics, I realized, no, we're doing the same. The January weekends are nothing like what the end of the year weekends were, which you'd think is an obvious answer. But in reality, our Januaries used to be really strong for us. And it was never a point where I'd worried about sales going down in January. I mean, obviously they'd go down from December, but they would never go like down. Then it's like, oh, it's bad. But then I looked at 2024 and thought, oh no, that's bad. However, we pulled out and had not quite a normal Saturday, but way better than it looked like it was going to be.
I mean, I did talk to you on the phone earlier this week where I randomly called you to talk about a comic we had both read. You were talking about how foot traffic was down on that day too. I talked to Christina Merkler from Lunar Distribution and DCBS about this a while ago on the podcast. And we had kind of had a conversation about the first quarter of the year and how it's always slow. Is it slow because publishers think it's going to be slow and don't publish a lot of stuff? Or is it just slow because that's how consumers behave after spending a bunch of money for Christmas? I don't really know, but it kind of feels like a chicken and egg type situation for comic shops.
Well, I think that it is more the fact that publishers tend to slow down and don't have any huge launches at the start of the year. February is always a huge month for us, but every February we run our annual and our only store-wide sale of the year, I Love You But Have Chosen Comics, where everything is 25% off from the 7th through the 13th. So it's a full week and it is off of everything. So that always boosts February for us. And we specifically chose that week because it's far enough after Christmas that you've started paying bills and you're a little resentful of having to pay money for things you bought for other people. And you think, don't I deserve something? And it leads into Valentine's Day.
But you create your own heat there.
Yeah, exactly. So like February is always good for us. But traditionally, like when we get the catalogs, I was going to say previews, but that is not the end all be all of sales catalogs anymore. When we get the catalogs for your January, February's, and Marches, it's really hard to find something to rally around normally. But this year is a little bit different. We have Lucky Devils coming up next week in January. We've got 3 new Absolute books in March. And while they don't look to have the same impact Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman had, they're still going to get a lot of interest. So we're starting off the year with a little bit more of a
momentum.
Yeah, momentum, like more of an output that we are excited about to get people excited about.
I will say last January did have Ultimate Spider-Man, your #1 comic of the year per Instagram. So there was that. But at the same time, that was kind of like weirdly a sleeper hit for a Spider-Man book.
Here's a great statistic about Ultimate Spider-Man for Challengers. For our single issue yearly sales charts, I'll do this real quick. The top 10 are just Absolutes and Saga. Ultimate Spider-Man comes in at 11 and goes up through 22. Every issue of Ultimate Spider-Man came out in 2024. #1 does not rank in our top 50.
Whoa. Is that just because you didn't have enough copies?
2 through 12. Yeah, and it's 2 reasons. One, we ordered higher on Ultimate #1 than we did on Amazing, but we should have ordered, honestly, absolute numbers. And 2, we don't add up all the covers. And there were a ton of covers for Ultimate Spider-Man #1, but our list is just individual covers, not a whole. I don't want to go back and do the math and figure out how many covers and just add it all together. So it's only the A covers for all these books that have charted.
I mean, Dynamite alone would be like a day of Excel spreadsheet work. I'd be out of control.
You'd think that, but Dynamite is not a company that statistically would register in our top 50 books.
I know. I was just making a joke.
You're right. And it's true that we don't need 36 covers for any book ever.
So you said that 2 through 12 for Ultimate Spider-Man was ranked 11th through 22nd for you, exactly in that order?
No. So actually, it's our 11th highest selling book of the year is Ultimate Spider-Man 4. 12 is 3. 14 is 10. 15 is 8. Yeah. So
but it's that series. It's all that series. That is so funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's predictable. Honestly, in a weird way, you kind of would want that result, right? Because that means attrition isn't that bad. It means that it's sticking in the same area. So good job by you and and Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, I would love to see the same chart, the same list at the end of 2025 and have all the absolutes be at the top,
Yeah. I did want to ask before we get into the meat of things, is Saturday still your top day? Is that the #1 day for you guys?
Wednesday is always the top day. It's always Wednesday. Saturday is always number 2. Every once in a while, there'll be a Sunday that beats it, but it's traditionally Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Thursday, Monday, Tuesday.
And you still have kind of like the same breakdown in months where it's like the first quarter is a little bit slower. The final quarter is the one where you're kind of doing a bum rush of sales and everything like that. So you have the theme month in February where you're 25% off of everything. What do you guys do to kind of stimulate foot traffic and stimulate energy in the other months? Because it seems like, I mean, obviously you can't just always have things 25% off or 50% off or whatever. But I know you have events. You have Ryan Brown and Charles Soule coming for the Lucky Devils on January 11th. What else do you try to do to motivate foot traffic and bring people in?
Theme days always work well. And these are specifically ones that are nationally recognized, internationally recognized. Your Batman days, Wonder Woman Day when they did it. We try to do as many events as we can, but we've long since passed the point of spending money on events. Like we don't fly people in and put them up anymore because the return on those is not negligible. It's negative. Like you lose money every time you fly somebody in and put them up and feed them for the weekend. You're never going to make that money back on the event itself. But when we do local events, any local artist, any local creator who wants to do a signing at the store, we'll make room for them. It doesn't matter what they have out. If they have nothing out, we don't care. You're welcome to come by. We're very lucky that we get a lot of visiting creators who want to do stuff at the store. So we'll do events with anybody at any given point. One of our biggest events of last year was, and this is no surprise to anybody that knows the store, we had AJ Mendez and Amy Garcia in for Day of the Dead Girl #1. And that was huge for us. Like so huge, we did almost our full free comic book day setup to accommodate them and their fans. And we only had them for 2 hours. They signed for us once back in 2019. And they were here for like 5 hours, but this time we only had them for 2 hours. So we had to make everybody move through the line as fast as possible. It's always trying to do something. And it's the little things of our podcast. It's the weekly videos that we do on Instagram telling people what's out every week. It is, normally I was going to say it would be the FOC posts we do on Instagram, but there's no engagement on those whatsoever. At least the videos get a lot of views. Our goal is always to make you think about us when you're not here. And by us, I like the store.
I did like your best-selling list that you did. I don't know when that was because the Instagram algorithm shows me stuff.
You know what? It was just today. I always wanted to do it January 1st, and I was holding out. Unfortunately, one of our people, Gina, never got me her list, so I had to do it without her. So it just went up today, a couple of days late.
Yeah, but I mean, like you had like the highlights for each person, and then in the actual write-up, you had like the list of the books that kind of factored into your thinking in the process.
And there's controversy because Somna, you can make an argument for Somna being our
2 first place votes, top book of the year.
Yeah, and 2 first place votes, but 1 second place vote. Birds of Prey had 1 first place and 3 second place. So doing the math, I don't know. Like it could go either way.
I mean, you could have just done a tie, but whatever. The point is you're guiding people, and I think that's a very good thing. But let's get into the meat of the conversation where we'll be talking
Yeah.
about where Challengers is and the general state of comics retail. Before we do, though, I have to ask, are you still psyched out at all when it comes to this podcast because you might talk a creator out of their plans like you did with Karen Gillan previously? Are you afraid of the powers you wield, Patrick?
You know what? I was kind of mortified about that when it happened. But if any of that in any small way contributes to how we got Power Fantasy, then I am all for it because that book is A plus. Love it. It's doing well for us. And it's the only non-Saga, non-Marvel DC book in our top 50.
Oh, wow.
Power Fantasy #1 came in at number 28 for us in the top 50. And I'm sorry, 49 was Last Ronin 2, #1. So I take it back. But it's the only Image book that wasn't Saga to crack our top 50. So, and also I love it. It's a great book, and it like I said, it sells well for us. So if that in any way made Kieran Gillen change the way he was going to release Power Fantasy, I think that the way he did it worked.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to say that I feel that sometimes I come into this a little bit too negative, and obviously just a reflection of having done all the paperwork for the end of the year and seeing what the sales are. And coming into December, I was so excited to be selling comics. And then December just shit the bed
Oh, no.
for us. But we also have a brand new Barnes and Noble that's 4 blocks away from us that just opened and that killed all of our holiday sales. We saw all of our regulars over Christmas, and they bought their books and they bought their presents here, but we didn't sell nearly as much manga as we do sell in December. And we think a lot of just the gift buying was taken away by them.
You're literally living the plot of You've Got Mail right now, which is
Yeah, exactly.
terrible. I mean, I think you're going to have to romance somebody that works there. I'm not really sure how that works precisely, but
Doesn't matter. She still lost her store.
that's true. That's true. Okay. All right. I'm going to find a different rubric for you to build off of. That's not the best one to choose from, but
Are you going to call this episode The Challengers Around the Corner?
maybe. Actually, I just watched Shop Around the Corner for the first time. Jimmy Stewart was kind of a dick in that movie.
Yeah.
A little bit. But anyways, no more Jimmy Stewart talk. You talked about December. How was 2024 in your shop, especially in comparison to 2023?
Okay, so 2024 was trending down almost the whole month. We had a couple of months that were up, but we were down, not a ton, but just enough to be like, well, this is disappointing because 2023 wasn't huge. October and November were so stellar for us that they combined took us into the positive and so high that they were able to combat December's negative. So if you're ready for this, David, we were up $1,180 in
Nice.
2024.
Well, relative to 2023, right?
Yes, 0.019%, 207 percentage points. But up is up.
Yeah, up is up. That's a win. I love it. Okay, but I mean, that does bring up a really big question. What was up with, was it October and November, literally just Absolute? What was it?
Yeah, you said it right there. Absolute got people in the door. Getting people in the door is the hardest part. Then it's our job to direct them to other books, which is easy because there's so many great books that are out there. I mean, just if the same Instagram post you're talking about with our best of lists, which were just employee recommendations, the diversity in those lists is wonderful. And that's why we have the people that we have who work with us, because everybody's tastes are different. So we need things to get people in the door. And yeah, it could be a star of Lucifer and a former women's championship wrestler. It could be me being on local news promoting Batman Day. But once people come in and see that there's more than just that one thing they came for, it's our job to keep getting them. A very interesting Saga fact for us is that we have a lot of subscribers who are just down for Saga. And every couple of months when we're pruning what we call, let's just say delinquent subscribers, not the word we use behind the scenes, but we'll just say that for the podcast. There's always 3 or 4 people that just have 3 or 4 issues of Saga that they just stop coming in. But Saga is still our best subscribed to book. And for every time we lose, every quarter when we lose a couple of people, we've already gained those people back. New people come in to sign up for Saga.
That's so wild.
So it's self-replicating subscription where the numbers are like the subscribers are always changing, but the numbers basically stay the same. But for some reason, we can't get those people to sign up for other books.
Saga in specific.
Yeah.
I'm always curious as to how Saga has been doing since its return, because I know its immediate return was pretty strong for people, but
Yeah.
it's now got into this cycle where it's doing an arc like every year. They take a break and then they do an arc and then they take a break. And it's like an extreme version of the previous Saga schedule of arc 3 months with a trade release in the middle, arc, trade release, 3-month break, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's more like 6 issues, 6 months, 6 issues, 6 months, something like that. And it seems like it's still doing really well for you. And I think the interesting thing is it's kind of like with Dogman. I'm writing this, I have this piece that's going up next week that's about like things I'm watching next year. And one of the things I wrote about, amongst a great many things, is like how to adapt. Yeah, the Dogman movie. It's like the idea that maybe the Dogman movie is going to introduce more readers to Dogman. But in that, I was like, if there's actually people / kids who have not started reading Dogman already, there presumably is.
There has to be. Like, you can translate that to the comics industry and use Watchmen.
Right.
There's still people that haven't read Watchmen, in which it seems unfathomable, but there's so many people that just haven't read it yet. And the compact comics, if anything, have proven that. Real quick Saga note as well. Saga had 4 issues that were released in 2024. All 4 are in our top 10. Oh, I'm sorry. 3 in the top 10. 1 is at number 18.
Still, that's pretty impressive.
And that was number 70, the most recent one.
I imagine you have some readers that are just basically trade readers, right?
More people. Well, that's not true. It's not like we sell hundreds of copies of each trade immediately, but I'm sure most stores have found this, that the trade buyers of Saga are not the single issue buyers. And we always used to think that, oh, at the end of an arc, we're going to go up on the first of the next one because people will have read the trade and then they'll start buying the monthlies. No, they don't want the single issues. They just want to read it in the collected format.
Yeah.
So the fact that the single issues still do so well for us is honestly surprising, because I thought at this point, everybody just waited for the Saga collections.
I still read in single issues. I read the latest issue last night. It was really good.
Nice. And I want to point out that it is not Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples' job to prop up the comics industry. And we've relied on them since that book came out to always be our number one book. And yes, we were very disappointed for the 3.5 years when there was no Saga product coming out. And there was no Saga collection in 2024. Volume 11 was released at the end of last year. Now, Volume 11 sold well this year as if it were released this year. So great. But this calendar year, we only had 4 single issues and no trades.
Wait.
Yeah.
Saga Digest, Volume 1.
Oh, we didn't carry that.
Oh, hater.
No, here's why. It's the exact same price as the other Volume 1.
Yeah, that's true.
If it was a different price point or like double collections, like the compact comic something, totally would have done it.
Mm-hmm.
But because they're the same material for the same price, we didn't feel the need to have a different size.
I'm curious if some readers would pick it up, though, because it's a different size. I mean, the compact comics are kind of interesting in that regard. That has the different price in there, too, so it kind of skews the whole thing. But still.
Yeah, but man, like, can you imagine somebody buying the upcoming New Frontier in the compact comic and only getting to see Darwin Cook's art in those little tiny panels?
Yeah, I can.
But I mean, don't you think Fiona Staples deserves to be seen on a bigger page?
Absolutely. But I will say this. There's some amazing art in manga, and I bet if you made it in a bigger size, people would still buy it in tankobons. And that's just how it is. Some people just like that size. Sure,
and I agree with you there, but it's not like manga started bigger, and this is you're getting a smaller version now.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know. And for the record, we're going to order a ton of New Frontier compact comics. But I feel that for Saga specifically, because it wasn't anything different other than the shape, it didn't make sense to us to have the 2 formats.
And presumably the first volume is still available for order at the $9.99 price point.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. You know, we already covered this. Actually, there's 2 things. One, the first thing I want to bring up is I know this is easier said than done. Like when I did my predictions piece for 2024, one of the things was I said, I think there's going to be a tentpole hit in 2024 that's like maybe not Saga, but gives shops something to really hang their hat on. I didn't really expect it to come in October. I didn't expect Absolute to get that. I do think Ultimate was that to some degree.
I agree. I'll give you Ultimate for that. Yes.
But the question is like, I find it really interesting that the Absolute books in some way acted like the new 52 did like 14 years ago, in the sense that they brought a bunch of people in and gave you a chance to sell people on other comics. And that's what you guys really need. It sounds easy. Just do things like that more often. But what is to be learned from Absolute, I guess? That's my question for you, because I feel like there has to be a lesson here.
The lesson is you can never really predict how something is going to work. And when something sounds like it's a no-brainer on paper, I'm going to use Hush 2 as an example.
Yeah,
We have incredibly low expectations for Hush 2.
I've heard that from multiple shops.
It's nothing that was on anybody's want list. I don't mean subscription list. I mean, nobody's saying, you know what, we need a sequel to. And also doing it in two parts over 2 years isn't really the best way to get people that excited for it. But also when you tell me Scott Snyder is doing a new Batman #1, I say to you, what more does he have to say? How many Batman books has he done? I was not excited for Absolute Batman until we got the advanced PDF, and Dal and I both read it and said, holy shit, we have to go bigger on this book than on anything we've ever done before. Hell, we printed up a window banner for the Absolute books, and we almost only ever print up banners for our events, never for individual product. We had a window banner that had all three Absolute books with their release dates, and we left it up for a month after they came out. So asking me what publishers should do, fuck if I know, because I'm usually wrong about it. I didn't realize how great Absolute would be.
It seems like this is so useless. This is such a useless piece of advice, but it's like they have to look for what the market doesn't already have and what readers don't already have. Because like that's the thing is as great as Scott Snyder is on that book, the reason why that book pops is because Nick Dragata. And like the decision to put him on that book and let him go hardcore on it. Hardcore once again. And so I think that was the, I'm going to start crying. I think that was the inspired part of it. But I mean, I think that like really the lesson is you have to look for things that aren't being done, and easier said than done, of course.
Yeah, especially when we're in an industry that people only ever want to do what's being done immediately and just replicate that.
Boring. And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. 2025 is starting off with a bang over on Zoop. January is filled with launches from Rodney Barnes, rapper Exhibit with artist Jonathan Wayshak, author Jenny Wood, The Pedestrians Joey Esposito, Zen the Intergalactic Ninjas Steve Stern, and more. There's still time to support campaigns from Riley Brown, Alex Segura, and Michael Marisi as well. Plenty more campaigns are coming soon to Zoop from the legendary Joe Quesada, Adriana Mello, Monster Forge Productions, and more that are yet to be announced. Zoop would like to thank all the creators who have recently submitted projects and urge all creators to submit your project to Zoop. Click the Submit Your Project link at zoop.gg as they are providing services to even more creators than ever before. And now, back to the show. So we talked about Absolute, we talked about Ultimate, we talked about Saga. What else is moving for you? Were there any other notable winners in 2024 for you?
Well, I mean, obviously what goes hand in hand with Ultimate and Absolute would be Energon.
Right.
The Energon universe, while it is not for us on the level of these other two properties, it still breathed life into properties we were long since that were DOA for us. Transformers, we were selling, and don't forget, Dal's a huge Transformers fan, and the IDW stuff, he loved a lot of that, and he would pitch it to a lot of people whenever there was a new #1, and there was always a new #1, and there was always a new continuity, there was always a new storyline, like these Transformers are in space, these are on Earth. So every new #1, he would try to get people on board. And if we could sell 10 of #1, that'd be amazing. And then we'd be down to subscribers only by issue 4. And that was how everything was. G.I. Joe related, Transformers related. It was just like, okay, we know what our numbers are for these. And then the Energon universe happened, and these things, even G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, which we were selling 2 copies of, we're selling so many more of that for a book that was already on number 300. And people came in wanting to start it at 301. When I was growing up, it was always said that any issue of a comic is somebody's first issue of that comic. And I don't think that's true anymore. But at the same time, Dal got into Legion of Superheroes during the 5 years later period, the Tom and Mary Bierbaum, Keith Giffen, no code names, no costumes. seemingly impenetrable for new readers. And that's where his love of Legion came from. And he didn't start with number one. He started in the middle of that storyline and it worked for him. And he's like, I got to go back and find out what this is about. And we don't see that so much these days. People don't just pick up a random issue of Amazing Spider-Man in mid-run. They don't pick up Batman in mid-run. And those are the two books that we base the strength of the industry on as far as consistent sales for ongoing series. So the fact that people wanted to start with 301 was completely unexpected and great. And it's still doing way better for us than that series ever did in its not previous two iterations, because obviously Challengers wasn't around when it was a Marvel comic, but definitely for the IDW years.
I mean, isn't that what you want from those lines? You want the rising tide that lifts all ships. That's the thing that, I mean, that's the thing that has really worked about those, which, as listeners know, I've called micro lines, and they can call them whatever the hell you want. But the whole point is like those lines are small enough that if Transformers is big or Ultimate Spider-Man is big or Absolute Batman is big, it's enough to make people be like, should I try Absolute Wonder Woman? Yes, that book is awesome. Yeah. Should you?
It's the best one. It's the best Absolute book.
Yeah. It might be the best of all those books, but should you try Void Rivals, which I also really like? Should you try this? Should you try that? It's easy to do that when it's like 4 or 5 books or whatever. And yeah, I think that makes things really easy. And I'm not surprised to learn that. I mean, I think you told me before when we were doing the mid-year check-in that the Energon is selling at least 10x what the IDW stuff was selling, if not more.
Easy. If yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Not the, if not more part anymore, but still leaps and bounds what it was.
Yeah.
Our Transformers numbers have leveled out. Like we pretty consistently know what we're going to order for Transformers and for Void Rivals. G.I. Joe, we're still learning, obviously, because the ongoing series is pretty new. And it was interesting to me how the people that were buying Duke weren't necessarily buying Cobra Commander. You know, the people that bought Scarlet weren't necessarily buying whatever the fourth one was. I can't remember. Destro, thank you. That's the one. I think Destro might have been our weakest seller of the 4.
It was the last of the 4.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it was weak. It just means the least amount of sales.
I think people were ready for G.I. Joe at that point. They're like, enough preamble. Let's get to the main event. But I do want to ask about one of my favorite flavors of things for you. And I don't even know if this is really a thing. I always bring it up. You always have your 6 guns, or you used to have your 6 guns, your big hits that are Challenger specific. That used to be something that really existed for comic shops, where shops had that one book that popped for them and maybe not for everybody else. I don't know how much that is true anymore. Do you feel like there was a Challenger specific hit in 2024?
There were smaller ones. For 2023, there was Where Monsters Lie was good. So a lot of Kyle Stark stuff this year, like Pine and Merrimack, we could rally behind. But, it wasn't like, it wasn't selling hundreds of copies a month or anything. But there's smaller Challengers books. There's books like Black Cloak. Black Cloak is a consistent, strong seller for us. There is Indigo Children, which I loved, and it was really good. And it was, well, I want to say self-contained. It's not. There could be more, but I don't know if there's going to be more. That started out really strong for us, but people fell off it really quickly. Obviously, a book like Do a Power Bomb, but that was last year. These are all last year's books. We're trying to have Knights be one of those books, because Knights is just such a fun, it can appeal to everyone kind of book that on the surface looks like a horror book, but it's just a fun relationship, almost roommate comedy book.
Yeah.
Birds of Prey for us is a good rally book. I mean, we hope it's Lucky Devils this year. We're going to try for that for sure. One book that did moderately well for us unexpectedly was just a one-off from Humanoids called Total Suplex of the Heart.
Oh, yeah. Joanne Sparr? Yeah.
Who I didn't know anything about when this book came out, even though she'd done other good stuff this year, like the Fire and Ice miniseries from DC. Beneath the Trees. Beneath the Trees was, I'm sure, a book everybody mentions.
I got to say, Total Suplex of the Heart, one of the best titles of the year, though.
Oh, agree. And you know what? Not the original title. It had a different title, and someone in marketing said it's got to be called this. And I was lucky enough to be involved with, I knew about that book well before it came out, so I got to read it early on and get excited for it. That's what does the best for us, is when we have far advanced notice. And oftentimes it's just the creators who reach out and say, hey, can you read this book? Like, what do you think of this? And it could be Indigo Children. We got the first 4 issues of that before it even saw print. So then I had 4 months worth of time to like promote this book to people.
That's the tricky thing, though, is like, I'm sure you get a lot of comics. Like, how do you decide which ones to prioritize?
Well, honestly, it comes down to my personal taste and if I think it'll sell for us.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two separate things, by the way. Not like just because I love a book doesn't mean it's gonna sell.
Does this have Captain America in it? No, I'm not going to sell it then.
Get it out of there. I was a big fan of Ribbon Queen this year, and I was able to sell it really well to our horror people, but it wasn't like a crossover
Right.
for us. It didn't really transcend to your regular superhero writers, even though it's kind of a superhero story at start, or something like Public Domain, which we love. It's a very mid-level book for us.
I am going to keep talking about that comic until everyone reads it, and I might be talking about that comic forever.
It's great. Man, we were one of the first people to advertise in Zdarsky Comic News because we love Chip's work so much.
I'm so upset. I'm never going to advertise in there because all the cool spots are going to be taken, and like DC's advertising in there now. And I had my chance and I missed it. I'm so envious of you. That's my big regret of 2024. I didn't advertise in Zdarsky Comic News. Chip, damn it.
I do not know a single person who shops at our store because of that ad, though. I will tell you that.
That's okay. I mean, part of it's being part of something fun, Patrick. That's what it's all about.
Oh, for real. And that's why we did it. That's why we do a lot of things we do, just to say we did it, or to be able to be like, hey, it's bragging rights. Yes, no one's going to come to this event, but we're going to get to say we held this event, kind of thing.
Can I tell you something really goofy about myself?
Yes.
I added Zdarsky Comic News to my pull list. And when I told my shop I wanted to do that, they're like, it's a free thing, right? And I was like, I want it, and I want to make sure I don't miss it. And so I'm getting it on my pull list. And I'm like, all right. And so I'm the only person at Bosco's Comics in Anchorage, Alaska that has Zdarsky Comic News, a free publication in their pull list. So, woo!
The only reason it's not on my pull list is because I'm a Substack subscriber of his, so I get them emailed to me.
Well, I also am a subscriber, but I like having a nice print thing. They're
Sure.
Literally right here. I have them stacked up next to each other. Here's the funny thing. I got 6 before I got 5. That's just like part of the quirk of the comic world, but whatever. But tying into what we're talking about, the Challengers hits, is hand selling a thing for you guys anymore? Like, does it have an impact?
Yeah, it's one of the only things we still really have. I mean, I'm sure you've heard from everybody, and you've heard from us repeatedly, that people don't pre-order books anymore. They wait till the week that they're out. They only add them to their list once they're out, or only after FOCs have closed. That's when most people want to add books to their lists, is when it's too late for us to be able to change our numbers or to do anything where it can, in fact, benefit us. So being able to gauge sales of a book based off of pre-orders doesn't help, but it is still our ability to pitch a book. And honestly, that's one of the only real joys we still have left in this industry, is pitching a book to somebody who's never read it and then having them come back and say that they liked it. And oftentimes they don't say anything at all, and nobody ever says, I don't like it. There's somebody that says, I'll buy anything you recommend to me because I've liked it all. And I always say, you can't like it all. There's got to be something you don't like, just because A, you're not me, and B, I have to know where your tastes lie. Otherwise, I'm not recommending a book to you. I'm recommending a book to me, and I already know that I like it.
Maybe they are you, and you just don't know it. They just have the exact same taste as you.
I feel bad for them.
Well, I do want to say, a year later, you recommended Masterpiece to me by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev on this very podcast. And afterwards, I literally went to my comic shop and I bought the first 2 issues. I really liked it. It was a fun comic.
Wasn't it? It was a return to form for both those guys.
I thought it was great. Yeah.
I liked it a lot, and I look forward to more. It didn't do that great for us, but it didn't do badly for us. So I'll take that as a win.
I feel like people are really slept on it because I almost feel like people don't really know what, I say this with respect, what Brian Michael Bendis does anymore. That is what Brian Michael Bendis has always done. And I feel like they really missed out if they missed that book, because it's really solid.
Available in trade right now.
I do want to say your comment about like one of the only joys you have kind of makes me sad. I mean, it's always been, hand selling has always been a joy for you guys, because isn't that part of the reason why you do it, is like you love comics and you want to share it with people?
100%.
Yeah. So like that is nice, but it does make me a little bit sad, not in a hardcore music sort of way, more of an actual sad sort of way. But beyond the biggest selling comics, what do you think the best thing you can say about 2024 in your shop? Like, is there a specific success story you have beyond just like, we sold a bunch of Absolute comics?
I feel like 2024 is a year that a lot of our customer base has taken more control over the books that they're getting. Like they're not just buying what the industry tells them to buy, they're actually curating a little bit more their own collections and they're being a little bit more thoughtful about what they get for themselves. Because it's too easy to just say, well, I always buy X-Men, I'll buy X-Men. But the industry doesn't give you those options anymore because you can't just be like, well, I always buy X-Men. Okay, which X-Men? Which of these 13 X-Men monthly books are you going to get since you've always bought X-Men? So you have to drill down into it and you can't just you can't just buy every Batman book anymore because there's too many. So you have to pay attention to what you like and you have to really choose what you want. And there's obviously way more publishers than the industry can support, and all those publishers are putting out more books than can be supported. But I think that 2024 is an example of the books that I consider better quality getting more recognition than the books I don't consider better quality.
Sure.
And loath as I am to point out specific books and say, I don't know why they're doing a monthly, weekly, what if Galactus turned this person into a Herald series. But I also know I don't have to order that many of them because not many people at Challengers are interested in that kind of thing.
I mean, to be fair, I don't really know anybody that is. When we were in Texas, we stopped by a shop and my wife Amber saw, I forgot what it was. It was like some weird what if Minnie Mouse became whatever. And she was like, what is this? And I was like, I don't have a good answer for you. Most of the time I have a pretty good answer for her, Patrick. And I was just like, I got nothing for you this time. I'm sorry. I don't know why this exists.
They did the one-off what if Donald Duck became Wolverine, and I thought that's cute, that's fun. But now they're doing a whole line of them. It's like, no, people barely wanted the Donald Duck one. They don't want Mickey as Thor. They don't want Mickey and friends as the Avengers. They don't want Minnie as Captain Marvel. Maybe if you did like one book with everything in it, but as single issues, they're just taking up shelf space. But if you've got the corporate synergy, if you've got access to those characters.
I don't know how much want is really part of the core lexicon for Marvel these days, but that's a story for another time, perhaps later in this podcast. But
David, I say the word want. I'm sorry, no. I frequently tell people the word need doesn't belong in comic stores as much as we want people to want books. When someone's like, I really need to get the latest issue, I'm like, you don't need it like you need food, like you need shelter. But you can want it. You can want it real bad, and I want you to have it. But do you really need it?
I don't know. I can't think of any comics that I need. I don't know. Maybe I need Incredible Hulk 181, but I also need to pay my mortgage. So they're in conflict.
You got a Grail just a little while ago, didn't you?
No, it wasn't for me. It was literally for a podcast listener. So at the same comic shop where the What If Minnie Mouse becomes Captain Marvel or whatever it was comic, they had Fantastic Four 48. And one of my podcast listener who became a pal, David Kelly, and I've done stuff with him at Emerald City Comic Con where he helps me with video and audio stuff. I was like, I know you really want this comic. This is an amazing price. Would you be interested? And he was like, yeah. And I literally just shipped it off and it's hitting him on Monday. So okay. It's not my Grail, it's his Grail, but still, it was nice to be able to form a connection.
Facilitate that. Yeah,
facilitate that deal for him. But does that curation, you like that part? It's nice. It's nice that people are finding the good books for themselves. Does that make your job harder in some ways?
No, it doesn't change it as much. I mean, it's good that people are opinionated, and there's club members I could name specifically that I definitely will not, that I know like, oh, this garbage Marvel book, I know who's going to buy this. And garbage isn't fair for me to say. And nobody works on that book saying, I'm going to pump out a piece of garbage that doesn't belong in the industry. Everyone is excited to be part of any book they're doing. And I don't mean to denigrate their contributions at all. But as someone with limited shelf space, there's decisions that have to be made. And you have to say, I don't know why they're putting this book out, but I know people that will buy it regardless. And it's good to see that people are being choosier. You have to with rising prices and escalating quantities of books.
I mean, I guess as long as they curate in advance, it doesn't really make a big difference to you. But that does bring up something else that's been changing for you. I know you've made this switch to manage comics and Shopify as your kind of overarching point of sale system. That's an oversimplification for something that's probably more complicated than that. But how do you feel like that's impacted the way your customers behave? Because I imagine that curation kind of comes hand in hand with them being able to look through and be like, yes, I would like public domain. Yes, I would like total suplex of the heart.
It has been great, honestly. Like the Shopify aspect means everything we have in store is available online, and that is the best part of it by far. We now have a decent amount of online subscribers, people that we ship to around the country that we never had before, and people that buy from us regularly who aren't subscribers who have access to what we have because they have access to it. You can log on right now, challengerscomics.com, and look up, and you can see exactly what's on my shelves right this second. And that wasn't a thing we had pre-pandemic.
And I bought from you because of that.
Yeah. And we thank you and look forward to it happening again. But also, one of the best parts about the subscription management stuff with Managed Comics is that it lets people pick their covers. And the way any previous iteration of a subscription service we used to have, that was such a nightmare. Even if somebody would just say, I want all the B covers for DC, when we were using Diamond's Comic Suite, it never worked right. But now, there's fundamentally, there's a difference between a subscription and a pre-order. Subscription means you want the A cover of every issue of Batman that comes out. Great. Pre-order means you don't subscribe to a book, but you go in each month and say, okay, so for Batman 149, I want cover C, but for Batman 150, I want cover B, and for Batman 151, I want cover A. So you have way more control over what you want, but the impetus is on you to do that work every month. And when I was a monthly subscriber before I worked in this industry, it was a delight to look through the catalog and be like, I want that, I want that, I want that. And now you get to do it at your desktop or on your phone 24 hours a day, whenever you want. And to maybe keep you away from scrolling through political headlines, you can choose your covers.
Yeah.
And sure, the industry isn't ready for it full time. Like the comic data standard still needs to be implemented. So all the data is parsed the right way and all the covers are available when the orders are available. There's still way too many covers every month that it's just a box that says image not available, which is just mean to Image because it's not their fault. But there's too many unknowns for a lot of people. But we have a decent number of subscribers who, well, we say subscribers, but they're not subscribing, they're pre-ordering, and that they vary their covers every month so they get exactly what they want. And if I had to do that on my end, I would be furious at the amount of extra work it would take and trying to juggle that and making sure I was going through all the emails and knowing what they wanted. They do it themselves now. That's great. Thanks, Managed Comics.
That's awesome. I love it.
It's so much like Managed Comics makes life so much easier for us and for everybody else. And while there are still issues and they may not be where they thought they were going to be at this point, they're very receptive. Brian Garside and his whole staff, if you have an issue, they drop everything to work on it. And if you have a suggestion, they take it in consideration. You feel like they're as invested in your specific store as you are, whereas we did not get that same feeling from other programs we've tried.
I do think one of the interesting things is, and we talked about this previously for an article I wrote, is it has, at least previously, it changed kind of the relationship some customers have with the shop, where it's like they'll pre-order everything or they'll have their subscription list and they'll literally come in and get it and not even look at the stands and get out of here. And that is interesting because it's like simultaneously aiding discoverability because they can do the stuff online and they know exactly what they want going in. But also it's like, I would not have read Kaiju Max if I hadn't just walked through the stands and been like, man, this looks fun. I'm going to check this out. I'm not trying to be like, the old times were better, Patrick. We got to get back to the way it was. But I do think that sometimes there is something lost in the process of things like that happening. And hopefully that's turned around at all for you guys.
I agree with you. And we do have a handful of people that do just that. They come in, they don't move past the front counter area of the store. So on the one hand, you have to hope that they did their due diligence ahead of time when they looked to see what they wanted to subscribe to. The people that do that, their lists aren't huge. So they're not like the people that are into experimentation anyway. They don't seem to be people that are looking for new and exciting things. For them, it's more comfort food.
Mm-hmm.
And for comfort food, it just means you go in, you pick it up, and you go out. You don't walk into the restaurant and think, what do you have? What can I try today? What's going to be different? No, you go in, you order your hamburgers, you order your fries, and you leave because that's what it means to you. So you hope that they did the research ahead of time, that they looked at the menu online. But if they didn't, there's a good chance that they would have just looked straight at the new releases and not looked at anything else anyway.
Yeah. Patrick, this will not surprise you, but I love looking at a menu and trying the weird stuff.
So do I, David. That's kind of like that explains a lot about our reading and buying habits.
I think so too. I mean, some people are all about the experimentation. I'm like, yeah, I'll try your fermented shark Iceland. Yeah, I'll try, I don't know, 7 different dishes that are made with peas in France. Yeah, I'll do that. Same reason why I'll read pretty much anything you put in front of me. Anything could be good.
Yeah, and you never know when you're going to be missing it.
Exactly.
This is a more generalization, but I'm someone who's in the trenches every day, and it's my job to go through the catalogs, and it's my job to say, we want this, we want this, we want this. I don't ever feel like I read nearly as many books as you do. And when I look at your year-end lists, there's so many books. I'm like, what is that book? I've not heard of that book.
I made up most of them, to be honest.
Oh, that's fine. But there are literally things that even if we were aware of and we passed on, once they make year-end lists, I'm like, maybe I need to check this out. Maybe this needs to be, oh, you know what? Yeah, okay, no. There are certain things that sometimes you miss, but then you're like, oh, David likes it, so we're going to give this a try.
He's holding up the Library Mule of oh my God, I'm going to mispronounce it. Somebody told me I pronounced it wrong on the podcast. Now I'm in my head.
I thought it's just Cordoba.
Cordoba. I think it's Cordoba. The Library Mule of Cordoba. It's an ablaze translation of a French graphic novel by Leonard Cheminot and, oh my God, Wilfred Lupano. Yes, I did it. High five to myself.
Look at that.
Boom.
Can you see that?
That's really small. No, I can't. What does that say?
It's a dented corner.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That is how I want to say 60% of our graphic novels come to us nowadays.
Bummer.
From everybody. There's no quality control in packing.
Well, the good news is nobody CGCs those yet, though.
Yeah. We learned a long time ago that the book industry doesn't care about how they ship books because, oh, look at that. This Vengeance and Moon Knight trade doesn't belong in the Absolute Superman single issues. The book trade doesn't care about the quality of the books that they send out because the majority of their customers are buying their books on a returnable basis.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter to the stores and the market. And it wasn't until they started doing business with comic shops that comic stores were like, these are all unsellable. And for the most part, everybody except Ingram is really easy to deal with as far as damages and returns go. And I'm not saying Ingram isn't easy to deal with, but their process for reporting damages is still archaic. You have to fill out a paper form and send it in. Whereas like Penguin Random House you can go to the website and just report your shortages there. Lunar's system is easy. Lunar wants more proof than Penguin Random House does, but they've made it easier because they know how often it's going to happen and they don't care.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Then, Cruel Universe hurtled you to the brink of oblivion. And soon, Cruel Kingdom throws wide the gateway to a new age of fatal fantasy. Oni Press is proud to unveil a spellbinding new chapter in the distinguished lineage of EC history with Cruel Kingdom #1, EC's first ever dark fantasy anthology conjuring tales of magic, myth, and murder from forbidden realms long before our own into comic shops everywhere on January 8th. Behold the bloody and barbarous age of wizards, knights, and dragons as reimagined in the immutable EC manner as enchanting writers Chris Condon, Al Ewing, Greg Pak, and Ben H. Winters couple their forces with Iron Rot artists Charlie Adler, Kano, Leo Max, and Andrea Muti to forge a terrifying new vision of death, life, and adventure once upon a time. Cruel Kingdom #1 on sale January 8th from Oni Press and EC Comics. And now, back to the show.
I do have to ask, I mean, I'm going to skip, normally I'll ask about like what didn't work. I know some of the things that aren't working. We kind of have talked a little about some of the things that aren't working. One of the big topics of late has been distribution because I don't know how reliant on Diamond you are, but my shop is very reliant, and it has been more than a month since they got comics on time. And I'm curious as to how you're feeling about the distribution situation, because that's something you're talking about right now, like the quality of stuff that's coming in from the book trade, but single issues are pretty rocky right now. How is that impacting you?
So I think I'm going to have a different opinion than a lot of people in that we only get Diamond for the things we can only get from Diamond. And that's Boom, that's Dynamite, that's now Distillery, and most of our merchandise.
Can I wait? Really quick hot take. I don't even think it should be a hot take. I think that's the way you should do it. I think you save money that way.
Oh, for sure. Just because it's easier. And I think it was nice in a world where everything came from one distributor and you used their software, and importing invoices was the click of a button, and there was no massaging data from 7 different distribution points. But yeah, like our philosophy from the beginning has been wherever someplace is available, we'll go there first, and then whoever's left over goes where leftover goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically, our goal wasn't to take everything away from Diamond. And I'll be honest, Diamond helped us during the pandemic, because it wasn't until the pandemic, they were always working on a Shopify plugin for your inventory. But when the pandemic hit, they really worked hard to get it done. And without them building that plugin on their site, because Shopify is a site, Shopify doesn't solve any problems. They let other developers solve it for them, and then they can charge you to buy their plugin for them. And when Diamond made that available, that we could then get all of our merchandise online, that's when we're like, yes, Shopify. So this is a situation where Diamond gave us the tools to eliminate them from the equation.
But you still got to do what's right for your business, though.
Right. And that's what any customer can say when they're leaving. Like, oh, I can't afford comics anymore. I have to do what's right for my family. Fine. You can't argue with that.
You've been kind of insulated from it because of that, though.
Sure. So when Diamond had this unfortunate situation where they were moving warehouses and they had to move much sooner than they thought they were going to have to, and it caused more problems than they thought were going to happen. They don't want to be in this situation, and I know they don't. And I feel bad for them that they're in it. And I know it's not malice. I know they're not trying to hurt anybody. B, it's happening to everybody, not us specifically. This is not a Challenger's problem. This is an industry problem when you get your books from Diamond. So those two things together, like, I don't mind as much. Diamond is, for us, consistently a week behind where the releases are supposed to be. Fine. They're behind for everybody. It's not like my competition down the block has the books that I don't have.
They're consistent.
Yeah. So they're just saying, hey, things are a week late from now on. Fine. I'm a little worried about when they catch up. Is there going to be a double week? But even that's not going to be that big of a deal. David, I'll be honest, our next week's books for Diamond, which should have been technically this week's books, showed up yesterday here, and I had to check them in. It was one box.
Yeah.
It was one box of stuff. And there's a bunch of manga restock in that as well. So yeah, obviously we just restocked the manga that we can only get from Diamond. But I feel bad for them. I'm not mad at them for it, because they don't want to be in this situation. They're not doing it to anybody out of malice. They know they're hurting themselves. They know they're hurting retailers, and they're doing what they can to fix it. But literally, because it's an industry-wide problem, I'm not bothered by it.
Yeah. To be honest, when comics don't come in on time for me as a consumer, it doesn't really make a big difference, because I'll just get it when they actually come in. Lunar was late this week, and they're getting the comics in on Monday. You know what I'm going to do, Patrick? I'm going to go get them on Monday. Yeah.
This week, Lunar didn't ship out the new issue of Spawn cover A and the new issue of Walking Dead cover A. Was it this week or last week? One of these 2 weeks. That's a problem I have in the industry now, is that...
Oh, inconsistent for covers?
Well, no, the fact that today is January 4th, but I did all the breakdowns for the invoicing for the 15th. So I can never remember, when is the book coming out? Because I've got this week's books in my head. I know it's coming out next week, and I just worked on the following week's books. So I frequently say to somebody, oh yeah, that's coming out next week. No, it's coming out in 2 weeks. I just got the invoice a week early. Not early, but that's when we get them now.
I know you and I talked about this before I wrote the piece, but I really think the whole, like, no one knows when comics are coming out thing is like a very underrated issue. And it is kind of confusing, because like I did the poll article, and I had the Nice House on the Lake #6 in there because it was in the shipping list I looked at. And apparently it's not out for like a month and a half or something like that. And I was like, I just going off a shipping list. I don't know. And it is fascinating how hard it can be to figure that basic question out. And I do think it can harm individual titles. I think comic shop shop customers are resilient enough that they will just come back when the comic is out, probably. But it brings into question, and that is a problem. That brings up a big question, though. Obviously, there's a lot of different, you don't know what's going to hit necessarily. You know, the absolute books are going to do pretty good. You know, your ultimates, you know, your energons, et cetera, et cetera. But what about the stuff outside of the comics itself? I know that has been kind of the thing that's been problematic for you the last few years. How much of the challenge of the job are those things, the point of sale challenges, the marketing issues, the distribution frustrations, I have to do 9 things when it used to be 1 thing. Is that still kind of the biggest hardship in the retail life?
Yes, definitely. And none of that has changed. The only thing that has changed is the fact that we're getting used to it. So we acknowledge like, okay, this is how it's going to be. Should it be that way? Doesn't matter. This is the way it is. So I think that Dow and I specifically have adjusted to our individual roles with this in Challengers. And honestly, I work more from home now than ever before because so much of this can be done outside of the store. And we only have we've got one computer and one iPad, and the iPad is a register. So you can do regular computer stuff on the iPad, but you have to stop constantly because you're ringing up customers and jumping back and forth between programs. And if Dal is doing some sort of big data thing on the main computer, it's like, I have to wait my turn. I need the big box. I have to wait. So there's days where just like, I'm just going to work from home. And I do all the ordering from home. I do all the billing and the paperwork and the payroll and everything else. I do it from home. There's so many things so like my job when I'm in the store is selling books to people. And that includes checking books in and reporting all the damages and that kind of stuff. And then maintaining the store, which is everything from vacuuming to dusting to spacing the shelves all the time to making sure we have enough customer bags under the counter. Bag tax in Chicago has gone up to 10 cents this year. So people should be bringing their reusable bags whenever possible. Don't give the city those extra 3 cents because it was 7 cents before. And just the general maintenance that the everyday customer should never even be aware of. You know, they shouldn't know that our tape dispensers are full or that the staplers have all the staples in them. That's not their concern. We do have a tape station on the floor where people can go out and bag and board their books, and we've got tape out there. So obviously that needs to be refilled at all the times. Little things like that, like just basic little minor office management stuff that needs to get done. That's one of the things that people overlook. But also, again, no one should notice that kind of stuff has to get done. But the most important thing that I do when I'm here is talk to people, get them buy books. And when I'm in a bad mood or someone rubs me the wrong way, I have to stop and say, hey, man, this is why you're here. Maybe you don't like this person. Maybe they're buying a book you don't like. Who cares? Just because you're having a bad experience doesn't mean they have to have one. So it's my job to make sure that they want to come back to the store. Do I do that every single time? Probably not. Should I? Yeah, as much as possible.
You try.
My coworker today was Donovan, who after a couple years off has come back into the fold. And she just said today, you know, I hate people. Why do you want me here? Like, Donovan, it's because I hate people too, but then I can make you deal with them so I don't hate them as much. I don't care if you hate them.
I don't believe you hate people.
Not as a generalization, but specific people, absolutely. I'll give you a list.
Oh, sure. You talked about ordering in there. One of the things I'm curious about, there are a lot of comics these days, a lot of comic publishers. There are a lot of comic products. There are a lot of comic covers. How are you managing that all when it comes to ordering? Because that's the thing is it's not just the fact that there's 3 distributors to order from just in single issues. We're ignoring all the book trade ones there also. It's that there's a lot more to order from each of them. How are you managing that?
It is harder than ever before, specifically because when we were using everything that was tied to Diamond's Comic Suite and Retail Management Hero system, you could pull up their ordering function and it would say, hey, here's how many you ordered of last issue. Here's how many you've sold. Now, since our register is Shopify doesn't have that information. Like, they don't have a comics ordering screen. So, like, we order each distributor's books through their website. You know, we order Diamond through Diamond. We order Lunar through Lunar. We order Penguin through Penguin. And that means having a bunch of windows open to bounce back and forth to say, what were the sales on this issue? how many covers were there. Lunar is great because it'll give you here's what you ordered of every cover of this book last month, the month before that. But they don't track sales information. They don't have that information, and nor should they. So they can't track it. Diamond will tell you, here's a combined number of what you ordered of last issue, but it doesn't break down between covers, incentive covers, or whatever. And PRH will also say, oh, here's your total for the last issue. But that's just what you've ordered, not what you sold. So you have to do a lot more digging on your back end to find out what's actually selling. So that makes it a significantly longer process. Because there's two of us, we have it broken down pretty well where I will do initial orders and Dad will do final order cutoff numbers. So both of us have eyes on each number. I start, he finishes. He will, he can veto me if he wants. Oftentimes, if it's a new number one, he just leaves whatever I put in because he's like, I don't have a different take on this. But he'll be the one that does the final check, like, oh, since you ordered this a month ago, we sold less of the most recent issue, so I can cut that. Or, hey, there's an uptick, we can order more. So it really benefits us to have two people doing that job because it is so much extra work. And I feel bad for anybody who has to do all of this on their own. But here's also a secret ordering thing that it's not a secret. I don't know why I said secret. Specifically for Penguin Random House, we don't do initial orders anymore. We just do the orders at final order cutoff because it became way too confusing because the way they keep their cart system open. So every order you place, and this is inside baseball to the max, I'm sorry, but every order you place on the Penguin Random House website, it goes into a cart. And all the carts are dated by when the books are released. So if you were going to do initial orders for the month, you would be opening like 12 different carts because you have every week of the month that the single issues are available and every possible release date for a graphic novel, which could be any point after that month is up. So they'd be in a different month. And then things that are too far in the future that don't have a specific release date go in a different cart. So you suddenly have, like 12 different carts open, and they stay open until final order cutoffs are done. So when you go to do your final order cutoffs, there's already a number in that cart, and it got to be a confusing nightmare. And I want to say it was Django Boren from Comics Place in Washington who said, just stop doing Penguin initials, just do FOCs. So you're only doing one cart at a time. And that actually made life a little easier.
Couldn't you make the argument that you should only do FOCs on all of them if that was the case?
You can't make that argument, but it's good to have a safety net in case something goes wrong, in case there's a blackout and your power's out and you miss something. If I skip a book, Dal can catch it.
Yeah, there's the checks and balances.
Yeah, exactly. And because those are only one for Diamond and for Lunar, it's one order. So it's not like you are throwing the numbers into the void everywhere. You can just pull up one order and double check. And if there's some reason he can't do the FOCs, we're covered with initials. So yeah, it's just, and also, things do change, but sometimes if he'll see that I went high on a new book, he'll be like, oh, I wasn't going to do that, but all right, I'll take the faith he has in that book or whatever. So yeah, you can, there's a lot of retailers that just do the FOCs, and I get it. You can't do that for Diamond because the whole back half of their catalog, you have to do initials only. Fine. But since we are a two-person system, it helps to give both sets of eyes a chance to do the same work.
That makes sense. And I should note for listeners, final order cutoff means the last time you can actually change your orders for comics when you're ordering them.
Up or down being the key. You could always try to reorder a thing after that, and maybe they'll have extras. You can get those, but you can't go down anymore at that point.
I think Absolute Batman would disagree with down being the key. In that case, up was the key.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. But you are just one retailer amongst a sea of them. So that's important to note up front. Every retailer has different takes on where things are. Challengers only represents Challengers, but what's your read on where things are right now for the larger world of comics retail? Like, do you have a feeling about things? Because it seemed like things were getting fatalistic again during the Diamond stuff, but it seems like maybe you're not feeling that quite as much.
Yeah, honestly, I like I said at earlier, I thought that everything was trending up. And I don't mean just for me, I mean for everybody. Now, we had a rough December, but I know a lot of people had better Decembers, and they don't have the
Barnes and Noble.
exactly. But I feel that there's a level of positivity from everybody or from most people, minus the diamond instances. And there's a lot of people that are so unhappy with diamond that they're finally going to leave them, or they're going to quit. They're going to quit carrying anything diamond whatsoever. And that's too fatalistic. I could never do that. There's too much stuff we get from diamond. Even if we wanted to say, no, Titan, we're never going to carry your books again, which we wouldn't do unless they did something horrible. But both my parents are dead, so what are they going to do? I can't. I'm not going to become a supervillain out of this, or I guess superhero. We both know if I got superpowers, I would be a villain.
Would you though?
Yeah, because my traffic rage is strong.
Oh. I'd probably be like Major Bummer. Did you ever read Major Bummer?
Major Bummer was great. John Arcudi and Doug Monkey.
Yeah, I'd probably just like sit around and be like, how can I make myself have free streaming services if I just sit around and use my super intellect? And then like I could actually lift things that are really heavy. I don't know what I do with the lifting part, but I definitely would watch more. Like I'm like, I want to watch Conclave tonight. How can I do that for free?
Sure. Conclave, by the way, very good movie.
Probably going to watch it tonight. So I will cross that bridge. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I think that a lot of times the conversation in comics retail will be amplified when it's negative. But a lot of the stuff I've heard is actually fairly positive right now. I know a lot of that is, I think part of the difficulty is it's pretty top heavy. It's like the absolutes, the ultimates, the inner Johns, the DC compact comics, which we really didn't talk about. Those were kind of lifting things up a little bit more, and it was adding to it. But the thing is it seems like the baseline is still the baseline, but then you have these winners there, and like that's beneficial. And I don't know. I got to give you credit. I know you said you were negative earlier. I don't really think you're that negative. You're actually a pretty positive person, and it seems like you always manage to keep your head above the discussion and not get too discouraged. But maybe it's because you've been doing it for a long time.
Maybe. I will say that one of the most gratifying things in the last couple of weeks is I did a bunch of year-end check-in calls with publishers, and I was talking with Arun Singh from Skybound, and one of the things he said was that for the first time, every retailer was saying the same things to him. Like he had his specific questions, and I'm not going to go into specifics because it's all about behind the scenes stuff. But he's like, I'm getting the same answers from everybody, and that's not how the comics industry usually works. And as you pointed out before, I'm one store in a sea of stores. I always say the comics industry has 2,500 different ways to do the exact same thing. So when everybody is giving the same answers, it's like, oh, you know what? We do feel more like a bonded industry. Like we're all understanding what it means to do what we do. And whether the same answers are positive or negative, the fact that we're coming to them the same way is refreshing, because we're used to, as you said, people just railing about the things that don't work or the things that affect them. And one of the reasons we joined Comic Show so many years ago was I was tired of the discourse of, David, here's my problem. You have to fix it for me, not David, here is our problem. We need to fix this for everybody. And I think we're finally getting around to the we need to fix this for everybody mentality. And the people that are having a lot of like the most problems with Diamond is because they're getting their Marvel and their image books from Diamond. And I'm sure that makes the most financial sense for them or what have you. But that's not affecting everybody that same way because of the decisions that they've all made. And the people that aren't in that boat see it from a different way and see it kind of more similar.
Sure.
We never agree on anything. The fact that we're all agreeing on things now, for good or for bad, is, I think, a positive thing.
I think so too. I mean, if everyone's kind of moving in the same direction, it's easier for your partners to, at least in theory, find solutions for those problems and continue to do the things that are working well for you.
Yeah. Or at least acknowledge that, oh, this is an industry problem. It's not this store or this geographical area problem.
Right. So 2025 actually does bring your 35th year in comics, or comics retail in specific. Is how many times have you seen that everyone moving in the same direction? Is this like a first?
It may be a first. I mean, I feel like I'm more connected to the international comics industry, selling industry as a whole, because of the internet, because I talk to people like Mitchell Davies from All-Star Comics in Melbourne all the time, because I get to be friends with John and Bruno from Big Bang in Dublin. And of course, local retailers that I talk to and national retailers. So it feels like it's a smaller world than it used to be. And again, we're all in the same boat, regardless of what ocean that boat is in. Oh, I like
That was good. That was good. I might have to change my title again. But also, it's different. It's like, it's not just when you're talking to other retailers that are like-minded. It's when Arun is talking to ones. And Arun Singh, who works for Skybound in sales and marketing, I believe.
He's a vice president of brand development, or sorry, Arun, I totally whiffed on that.
He transformers like crazy.
Exactly.
That's the important part. But anyways, he's talking to shops, and shops are giving him the same feedback. So it's not just like-minded ones. It's the ones he's talking to who actually prove to be like-minded. But I do think that's interesting.
And that helps the publishers more than anything, because if you have a multiple choice question and your choices are A through D, and you pitch it to retailers, you would get answers that go A through double Z.
Yeah.
And now the fact that people are saying like, oh no, it's like A or B.
Well, double Z, that sounds like a variant cover number. Yeah. I do have to ask, you were just in Ireland visiting with the Big Bang folks. Were you forced to have a spice bag?
Forced? No. Did I willingly have a spice bag? Yes. Was it delicious? Yes. Have I found anything like that here? At a Christmas market downtown Chicago, they had something akin to it. So I sent a photo of it to Bruno, and he just said, no, not even close. You didn't like a spice bag?
No, okay. I don't know if Bruno told you, but I did not end up getting a spice bag. And I've literally regretted it every day since I left Ireland. And I talk to Bruno about it regularly. A spice bag, for listeners that don't know, if I remember correctly, is basically a bag of fries and basically breaded chicken with a bunch of spices and random stuff in there, and it combines
also strips of onion,
and it's like basically just jammed in this bag and you eat out of a bag. And when he told me about it, it sounded so amazing. And we're going to go there after we went to a bar after I did a live podcast in Big Bang, but I had a terrible headache, so I was like, I gotta go to bed, and I never got a spice bag, and I'm so depressed by it. And I'm mad at you now because you had one, I didn't.
So they're almost exclusively for sale at Chinese restaurants, which is interesting. And one of the main spices is Chinese 5-spice, but a bunch of other stuff. And they come with either a curry sauce or a satay sauce that you dump all over it. So the bag is a mess. We'd gotten curry sauce and were chastised immediately by fellow Irish people I'm Irish, but I don't live there, that we should have gotten the satay sauce, which, the peanut sauce, like you get on Indian food, which is great. But it's an interesting double-bladed sword, because a spice bag is great when you've been drinking. They're also very spicy. So your mouth is burning, so you drink more, and then you have more spice bag, and it's a cycle that just keeps going. And I want to say that John and Bruno took such good care of me when I was out there. Bruno took a day off and showed me all over, and I hung out with them the beginning of my trip and the end of my trip, because the middle of my trip was in Tipperary for a wedding. But so I saw them both in the shop that Friday night. We had dinner, and then Bruno made sure I knew exactly how to get back to my hotel from where they were, because the tram system is very crowded. And then when I came back from the wedding, Bruno took that Monday off and just showed me around what his Dublin is as a non-Dubliner himself. And then we just waited till John closed the store. He came and met us. So much drinking that whole weekend, so much drinking that whole week, so much drinking. And then we just went from bar to bar to bar. It's like, hey, we're going to go down this block. Oh, here's this comic shop. Here's this record store. Here's this bar. Oh, I'm going to go get a tattoo. Okay, we're going to be at this bar. And then, oh, John wants us to go to this bar afterwards. I'm like, man, I'm leaving in the morning. Like, nope, you're drinking and you're having a spice bag.
The whole time that you were there, I was telling Bruno, I was like, get him to have a spice bag so I can ask him about it. I'm so glad that it actually happened.
Oh, it's so good.
Real last non-spice bag related question.
The spice bag, it should be the name of the episode now.
And it's making me hungry, and I've never even had this before. But I mentioned that you're coming up on 30, or you are basically in 35 years of comics retail. That is quite the run. People always seem to focus. We normally finish with this is our happy finish, where you will inevitably say, I love comics, and that's a great thing. But people have a tendency of focusing on what we've lost over the years in comics, not what we've gained. What are your favorite ways comics and comics retail have evolved over the years? Like, what are the things that you love the most about the change you've seen?
When I was a young comic reader who first stopped buying comics off of the drugstore spinner rack, and I found Lyle's Hobby and Craft train store in downtown Westmont that still sold comics on spinner racks, but also had older books. And that was my go-to store for a while until I found my brother at that point was a delivery driver, and he passed a store that had a Bob Larkin Incredible Hulk poster in the window. And for those who fondly remember this poster, it's just the Hulk's face and his fist right up at it, and it's fully painted. And so George stopped and found, oh, that's a comic book shop. Hey, they do subscriptions. They use a magazine called Advanced Comics. And every month we would go through, make an order of what we wanted, pay for that order up front. And when those books came in, we would pick them up. And inevitably, books wouldn't come out. Books would get late. They'd have to figure out at the end of a year what hadn't come out, what money has to come back. And the idea of the subscription service was such a new thing back then. And like I said way earlier in this podcast, sitting down with the catalog and going over it each month was a joy to be like, look what's coming out. Everything has evolved so much technologically that that ability is still there, but it is not us having to put a catalog in your box or in your hands. You get to do it. And just the reach of the industry, even though we lost the newsstand market, you don't really find comics on newsstands so much anymore, or in grocery stores, or in drugstores where I started from. The reach of comics is so much more expansive because of technology and the internet that even if you don't have a shop near you with a comic shop locator service or the internet, you can find somebody, a store somewhere, that will get you your books wherever you live. So you can still be part of this without having to make it your specific job to go to a store if you don't have a store near you, or if a store is too far away. Or looking back at the last 10 years or so, there's so many people that were weekly regulars who now got married, have kids, moved to the suburbs, still shop here, but we see them once a month or once every couple of months. They'll email and say, hey, can you ship my books out, kind of thing. So they're still with us, but we don't have that interaction. So life moves on, and normally these people would have moved on from us, but technology lets them stay with us. And whether it be social media posts or our own podcast, Contest of Challengers, or me being here on Off Panel, they still get to have challengers in their lives wherever their lives take them. So the very long-winded answer to your question is the reach of the industry now is greater than it ever has been. And it's hopefully keeping up with every other avenue of entertainment people can be part of. Comics are still there and in the same format when so many other things have changed. And I don't want to get too far away from your, retail and distribution question, but comics are still with you regardless of where you are geographically or where you are in your age group or where you are with your family and your kids. The retail side of it is still there with you.
Yeah. And also Challengers, its reach has increased so much that it is being impacted by demons from hell, as readers will find out in The Lucky Devils #2, in which Patrick himself guest stars, and a shirt, a potentially controversial shirt of Challengers, appears in the book as well. I love seeing that. When I saw you guys, I was like, that's so awesome. It's so great. But that was a wonderful answer, as it always is from you, Patrick. But that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Challengers, the year in comics retail, spice bags, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, David.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with retailer Patrick Brower. You can find him at Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago and Challengers on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Instagram. As per usual, big thanks to Deanna Chapman for editing this week's episode. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more.
Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketch at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off-Panel and Sketch on social media by following on Blue Sky and Instagram, or follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Whisper, Chris Robinson, Brian, MK Fryguys, David Byrne, Milton Lawson, David Wilson, Joe, Benjamin Wilkins, Chris Hacker, John Neesmith, John Auerbach, Dustin Weaver, Ninja Assassin Love Story webcomic, Brandon Heyman, Aiden Hammond, Faith Aaron Hicks, Ben Rowe, Cameron Brown, Jonathan Breen, Charlie Stickney, Tom Drennan, Jeremy Thomas Burke, Jared Schwab, Scott Dunn, Chip Mosher, Seth Pomeroy, James McEwen, Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Scott Place, Travis Gibb, Darcy Van Polgis, Tom Evans, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian Holt, Near Levy, Jason Hussick, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Django Boren, James Tyne IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Domstead, Ron B, Nick Walker, Petra Coyle, Isaac Oren, Klaus Vandeven, Submit Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashochi, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shelby, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Liana Kangas, Nick Bennett, Susanna Pola, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Stefan Holt, Philip Myra, Chris Pachalo, Torin Grunbeck, Buzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Walt's Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Yala Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, David Kelly, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nicole, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Carl McMahon, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off-Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. I'll put their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.